You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. So Skyrim has a lot of regular and unique weapons. You've got everything from maces to axes, and even various different swords and greatswords with a variety of stats. Ultimately, regular swords are more suited to one-handed or dual-wielding combat, while greatswords are more suited to two-handed playstyles. Today, I'm going to be going over what I think are some of the best swords and greatswords in Skyrim. But before we get into this video, I'm going to explain how and why I'm ranking these weapons. So my primary focus is going to be centered around base damage, though I will be making considerations for the weapon's actual weight, as well as if there are any impressive unique enchantments available on the weapon. So if a weapon has a good base damage and a subpar special effect, it's going to be lower on this particular list. But before I bore you guys any longer, these will be the top 9 best swords and greatswords in the Elder Scrolls Skyrim Remastered, starting now. Number 9, MIRAAK'S sword. So this weapon is sort of hit or miss in my opinion. At the same time, it wouldn't feel right to not include MIRAAK'S sword on this particular list. This is because MIRAAK'S sword can potentially have the highest base damage for a regular one-handed sword in Skyrim. I do say potentially because MIRAAK'S sword is a leveled weapon, and versions with the base damage of 16 only appear after level 60. Like several other weapons on this list, MIRAAK'S sword does benefit from smithing and can be upgraded with both an ebony ingot as well as a daedra heart. You also get double improvement from the dwarven smithing perk. The reason I said this weapon is hit or miss is because while the base damage is really good, I find that the enchantment is pretty weak and it doesn't provide hardly enough charges to make it really viable. In fact, you could probably enchant either a Dragonbone or DAEDRIC sword and get almost the same amount of damage and have more charges of the absorbed stamina enchantment. That said, the MIRAAK'S sword weight is much lighter than a DAEDRIC sword, and you're only getting an encumbrance of 3 as opposed to an encumbrance of 16 or so. I really feel conflicted about this weapon. The weapon stats are good, but the enchantment is kinda lousy. Ultimately, if you do want the best version of MIRAAK'S sword, you're going to have to wait until after level 60 anyway, and at that point, you probably have one of the better swords on this list anyway. Number 8, the BLOODSKAL blade. The BLOODSKAL blade is one of the more interesting concepts for a weapon in the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. When you perform a power attack, this sword emits this energy blast that functions as a short-range attack. If you've played some of the early Legend of Zelda games like A Link to the Past, you may recognize the BLOODSKAL blade's effect as being similar to that. And to give you some idea, and in terms of stats, the BLOODSKAL blade is about on par with a glass greatsword in terms of damage. However, the ability to have the energy blast hit enemies at the same time the weapon itself hits an enemy definitely makes the BLOODSKAL blade a little bit more powerful. The one thing I think holds the BLOODSKAL blade back from being an absolutely amazing weapon is that while you can upgrade the weapon's damage through smithing, it doesn't benefit from any other smithing perks other than the arcane blacksmith perk. This means that the BLOODSKAL blade isn't capable of double improvement. And you may also find that the energy blast that emits from this sword doesn't really do a whole lot of damage to enemies on its own, and this is why you will need to be close enough to an enemy for both the blade itself and the energy blast to hit for maximum damage. Now, depending on your viewpoint, this may defeat the purpose of the ranged power attack in the first place. The upside is that the enchantment on the BLOODSKAL blade doesn't require or consume any charges. Even still, the BLOODSKAL blade is relatively light and has less stamina drain for power attacks than the glass greatsword. I just wish it got double improvement. Number 7, the Nightingale blade. Just like MIRAAK'S sword, the Nightingale blade is a leveled weapon with a pretty decent enchantment. Unfortunately, it's held back by some bugs which, if they were fixed, it might actually make it a viable alternative to the one-handed DAEDRIC sword. As far as bugs go, unless you're playing with the unofficial Skyrim patch like I am, you're going to have to obtain an inferior version, as the level 46 version apparently disappears while trying to improve it at a grindstone. This is a shame, as the maximum level Nightingale blade provides the same damage as the non-upgraded DAEDRIC sword with a fairly good enchantment. The other problem with the Nightingale blade is that while it can be improved at a grindstone, it doesn't benefit from any smithing perks other than Arcane Blacksmith. This means you can't achieve double improvement unless you install the unofficial Skyrim patch like I have. Ultimately, it kinda sucks, because you're stuck with an inferior version of the Nightingale blade on consoles unless you install the mod. The thing is if you install the mod, you can no longer get achievements. This means in order to get the Nightingale blade on console, you have to acquire it sometime between level 36 and 45. Otherwise, you're getting an inferior version that just disappears when you upgrade it. Hopefully Bethesda will fix this in a future patch for Skyrim Special Edition. At the same time, it's been about 5 years, and we may never ever see that happen. Number 6. DAEDRIC Swords and Greatswords. So if you're watching this, there's a good chance that you own Skyrim Special Edition or Remastered. Assuming you don't own Skyrim Special Edition or Remastered, the DAEDRIC Sword and Greatsword are the most powerful craftable swords available to the player. This title was ultimately usurped by Dragonbone weapons that got added with Skyrim's Dawnguard DLC, which ultimately deals slightly more damage, but also weigh a little bit more as well. Unlike Dragonbone weapons, DAEDRIC weapons can appear in the wild as loot or even sold by certain merchants throughout Skyrim. This may be beneficial if you're looking for a powerful sword and don't have a high smithing skill at very high levels. Now, all DAEDRIC weapons, including swords, greatswords, and even the bows, maces, and axes, all benefit from the DAEDRIC smithing perk and thus get double improvement. Really the big advantage of DAEDRIC weapons is that you can enchant them, and provided that you have the extra effect perk from the enchanting school, you can actually apply 2 enchantments to a DAEDRIC sword. You could feasibly have a DAEDRIC greatsword that has both lifesteal and maybe even a fire or frost damage effect. The only real disadvantage is that DAEDRIC weapons are relatively heavy when compared to many of the other great unique swords available to you in Skyrim. The DAEDRIC sword provides 16 encumbrance, while the Dragonbane, for example, provides just 14 encumbrance. Ultimately, I'd say DAEDRIC is a good choice. Just be aware that there might be some better weapons out there. Number 5. BLOODSKYTHE and SOULRENDER. I figured I'd include these 2 swords together because you have to have both equipped to benefit from the enchantments that each possess. Like other scimitars that are traditionally wielded by the Redguard, both BLOODSKYTHE and SOULRENDER are designed to be dual-wielded. While dual wielding is arguably more powerful than using a 2-handed weapon, you lose the ability to block attacks. This means you will need some way to either take less damage, or you'll need a way to regain lost health while fighting enemies. Both BLOODSKYTHE and SOULRENDER require an ebony ingot to upgrade, and also benefit from double improvement provided the player has the DAEDRIC smithing perk, as well as the arcane blacksmith perk. As I mentioned earlier, both weapons have to be equipped in order to benefit from the enchantments. If you have one weapon equipped, you may find that you're getting no benefits while also consuming charges. BLOODSKYTHE absorbs health and also has a chance to lower the enemy's armor, while SOULRENDER absorbs magic and has the chance to lower the magic defense of an enemy. What also makes both of these weapons pretty good is their good base damage along with their weight. Now, the damage is slightly lower than a DAEDRIC sword, however you're getting 6 less encumbrance per sword. If you do wield, it might be worth your time to go to Solstheim to obtain these. Just keep in mind that you'll need the Dragonborn DLC to do that. Number 4, the Ebony Blade. So for the sake of clarification, the Ebony Blade isn't the same thing as either the Ebony Sword or Greatsword. The Ebony Blade looks more like a Japanese katana, while your ebony weapons are kind of like these crude shaped metal things. That's the best way I can describe them. It's also worth mentioning that in terms of base damage, the Ebony Blade is the weakest 2-handed greatsword in Skyrim. However, it also has the lowest encumbrance of any of the 2-handed greatswords at just 10. The Ebony Blade also has a very powerful enchantment that allows you to absorb 30 health per hit, all while not consuming any charges or needing to ever be recharged. And this does have a bit of a drawback. The weapon is made stronger by killing various NPCs that you've already made friendly. Provided that you don't use exploits, you will have to kill 10 friendly NPCs in order to maximize the Ebony Blade's potential. Now, another problem you may encounter is that the ebony blade cannot be upgraded at grindstone at all. That said, you may notice that I have a legendary version of the ebony blade here, and that's ultimately because I have the unofficial Skyrim patch installed. Normally, this is not possible. While the ebony blade has a low power attack cost, I've found that you're better off performing multiple regular swings on targets. This way you can keep your lifesteal consistent enough so that you don't have to worry about blocking enemy attacks at all. This tactic is even made more viable by the fact that you don't consume or require any charges while using this weapon. The ebony blade is really good when the enchantment is fully upgraded. However, you may find that killing friendly NPCs is pretty distasteful. Number 3, Dragonbane. So as the name implies, this is a really great weapon to kill dragons with, especially if you play as a one-handed character that primarily uses swords. The enchantment against dragons is great. You should be dealing anywhere between 20 to 40 additional points of damage to dragons, and just 10 points of shock damage to everyone else. The strength of the enchantment depends, as this is a leveled weapon, and you'll also find that the actual weapon weight and encumbrance, as well as the base damage, also depends, because this is a leveled weapon. However, all versions of the Dragonbane do benefit from the steel smithing perk, which, given the amount of potential damage this weapon can do, the requirements are fairly low. That said, you will still need the arcane blacksmith perk and a quicksilver ingot in order to upgrade Dragonbane. Now, provided you reach level 46 and higher, you can receive the best version of the Dragonbane. The base damage matches the standard non-upgraded DAEDRIC sword and weighs slightly less at just 14 encumbrance. Really, this weapon is going to be your dragon killer. You may find that your enchanted DAEDRIC sword is better up against standard enemies, but if you have the patience, I think it's worth it to play until level 46 to acquire the max level Dragonbane. It's really good for killing dragons. Number 2, Dragonbone swords and Greatswords. When it comes to raw base damage, the Dragonbone sword is really going to be your best option, as it provides an impressive 15 damage for the one-handed sword and 25 damage for the Greatsword version. Just like the DAEDRIC weapons I discussed earlier, Dragonbone weapons can be enchanted and can also benefit from the extra effect perk. After all, 2 enchantments are better than just the one that you're going to be seeing on the various unique weapons throughout Skyrim. The problem with Dragonbone weapons is that they are typically the heaviest weapons in Skyrim. The Dragonbone sword has an encumbrance of 19, while the Greatsword has an encumbrance of 27. And this is a decent amount more than DAEDRIC weapons, which only provide 1 point less base damage. What I think you will find is that if you tend to do a lot of power attacks, your stamina will drain fairly quickly with Dragonbone weapons. However, if you just swing one of these weapons like normal, you're going to be dealing more damage per swing than the vast majority of other weapons throughout Skyrim. If you ask me, Dragonbone weapons are pretty good despite their weight. And finally, number 1, the CHILLREND. In my opinion, CHILLREND is the best one-handed sword in Skyrim. While the Dragonbone sword may end up being a little bit better provided you've got the right enchantments, the CHILLREND is almost perfect out of the box. The enchantments on CHILLREND are ideal up against warrior-type enemies. Not only are you dealing frost damage, which can damage an enemy's stamina, but you also get a chance to occasionally paralyze an enemy, which allows you to mercilessly wail on them without the fear of being hit back. CHILLREND can also be improved at a grindstone with a refined malachite ingot, and you also receive double improvement provided that you have the glass smithing and arcane blacksmith perks. And this is a bit of an aside, but it's also worth mentioning that you can improve the frost damage of CHILLREND by having the augmented frost perk from the destruction tree. Now, there are some downsides to the CHILLREND. Based on how smithing perks work, you may find that CHILLREND benefits from a playstyle that is more suited to light armor, and this is because you get steel smithing when you first get the smithing perk, and then you have to choose whether you want elven armor, which I would consider to be the light armor path, or dwarven smithing, which is more of the heavy armor path. And because glassmithing is one of the last perks on the light armor path, you may find it's not really worth it if you're going to be using heavy armor to use CHILLREND. After all, you won't get that double improvement. Another thing is that you're going to have to be level 46 to get the best version of CHILLREND, and this may be a lot of playtime for some people, and you've probably got to ask yourself, do you want the Dragonbone sword earlier, or would you rather have the CHILLREND, which has a much better weight, has the same damage, but you're going to have to put a lot more hours in leveling the character. Ultimately, CHILLREND is a great weapon and highly recommended by me. Alright guys, that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and as always, take care, and I'll see you all next time.